Three, two, one. Welcome. Today we're talking about Jerry's Pond, and my guest here is LisaBirk. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Lisa is a former English and Social Studies middle school and high school teacher, and she was also, more recently, a project manager at Harvard University's Narrative Journalism program at the Nieman Foundation. Lisa went on to teach writing at Boston University, or to get that the other way around?
Other way around.
Yeah, okay. So she's also taught writing at Boston University and is a 2013 graduate of Grub Street Novel Incubator.
Exactly.
You have a debut novel called Last Night at the Pit, and that your work has appeared at the Harvard Review and Boston Phoenix, Orion Magazine, which is way up there in my echelons of reading material, so I'm very impressed, and other periodicals. But I didn't realize any of this. When I called on Lisa, I was completely unaware of all these accolades, because Lisa is one of the founders of the Alewife Study Group and the Alewife's Neighbors Incorporated.
Mm-hmm.
And those groups came together in 1995. So you've been at this for a while, and welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much. It's a real honor.
Now, I gotta admit that the title of her novel is Last Night at the Pit. And Jerry's Pond used to be known as Jerry's Pit. So is there any connection between the North Cambridge author there?
Yes, there certainly is. The climactic scene and some earlier scenes take place at Jerry's Pit in the 1970s.
Oh, that's so cool. So Jerry's Pond, it's out there in North Cambridge,
Mm-hmm.
and it's at the corner of Ridge Avenue and Alewife Parkway. So
Mm-hmm.
you see it when you're driving over to the Summer Shack or the subway. And Jerry's Pond is about 9 acres. It's in the southwest corner of a 27-acre lot or parcel that belongs to W.R. Grace Company, chemical company. And so it's pretty polluted in there. And recently, a developer has bought the property, and they plan to turn those chemical buildings into the next kind of Kendall Square with software developers and less chemical-oriented businesses,
Mm-hmm.
apparently cleaner, although the cars aren't any cleaner. And so they are viewing Jerry's Pond as an amenity to the local neighborhood, as a place they used, as you said, people used to go there and swim. And you were telling me about a connection of someone who was told not to swim there anymore.
Yeah, so it's those 27 acres, including Jerry's, have been home to a chemical company for 101 years. And that Jerry's Pit was a it first was a clay pit, and they dug the clay out and made bricks out of them. You'll still see them in Harvard Square and Fenway, elsewhere. And in 1961, a man who still lives here, Peter, was 11, 12 years old, and he was lined up to go swimming. It was a hot day. He was with his buddies. He had his towel, his suit, and was desperate to get in. And some men came out with clipboards and locked the gate behind them and said, "You can't swim today." And why not? So the word traveled all around the neighborhood. It was sometimes known as polio pit or polluted pit.
Oh my gosh.
Many parents did not want their kids swimming there, but Peter swam there. And that was the summer that it closed down for good. The kids would keep trying to go. They would call each other. It closed down for good. And that's how we got the McCrean pool.
Oh, good.
Was an alternative so that kids could still swim, kids and adults, but they could swim without the chemicals.
Right.
It was a good thing.
Now there's this chain link fence, and
Right.
so you can go along, and that was good. They opened the trees up along Ridge Avenue, so now you can see the pond better than before.
Yeah.
But it's all chained off, and but there's a wonderful Russell Field nearby, so people park it for Russell Field, and there's also, you've got a bikeway, the linear path that brings people from my town in Somerville. We can come down the linear path and tiptoe through Cambridge and get over to the Alewife subway station there. So we've got this new developer in town,
Yeah.
and the Alewife group, study group, ran this amazing, chock full of information session a couple weeks ago, where you even had time for like 3 questions. I've never seen so much information put together so tightly, because everyone likes to hear themselves talk, but this was like, oh my gosh. I mean, even your experts were earthed and just totally on target. So much so the developer was saying, we're going to hire you guys to run the next meeting and stuff. So you've got something. Tell us what are you planning about the next kind of get-together listening sessions for? I believe it's like this Sunday evening or Sunday.
Yes, this Sunday from 4:30 to 6 on Zoom. We are having our second community meeting of the year. And this 27-acre site is smack dab in the middle of our neighborhood, which has 3 legs: the Ringe Ave leg, the Clifton Street leg, and the Whittemore Ave leg. And it's a kind of a major crossing ground, not only for the 3 legs of our neighborhood, but for all of Cambridge and anyone who plays sports there. So this meeting on Sunday is a chance for neighbors to talk with each other about quality of life issues. What are our hopes? What are our concerns? What about the contaminants? What about traffic? This is our first chance in about 100 years.
Yikes.
Plan all these years to possibly shape more generously, more with more concern for neighbors than we've had since 1919, when Dewey and Elmy bought it as a chemical plant site. So this is a good moment. And Alewife Study Group, we've been studying the site for 25 years, which is crazy. That's why we have so much information. And our main charge is to both research information and then listen to neighbors, hear what it is they care about, what are their concerns, what are their worries, what are their hopes, what are their ideas, pull that together, try to find a Venn diagram of overlap. You know, what do we all agree on? We all want X and we're all worried about Y. Now, what do we do about those worries and those hopes? How can we take those forward with action and advocacy and turn them into concrete things that make, or not concrete, trees, maybe.
Yeah, natural things, yeah.
That make a difference for us as a neighbor. And of course, it is private property. So, you know, we also have to be mindful of that.
Yeah, so it is private property, but they're treating it like it's a public park, and they're all for access. You know,
they seem to, they're new to us. They bought the land in 2020 in 2 separate purchases. You know, the proof's in the pudding, and the pudding is not made, but they have made some moves that have given us some assurances that they really do care about neighbor input. One is that they have hired the excellent environmental engineer, Jen Sweet, to oversee the either cleanup or safe handling of the literally tons of loose fiber asbestos buried in the 27 acres of soil, and possibly the sediment of Jerry's, and possibly the water. We need more tests to find out if that's true. So there are some good signs with IQ.
Well, that's great they hired Jen, because Jen is the one you've been working with, right?
Yes, we have Alewife Study Group, thanks to DEP, is the neighborhood liaison with Grace and with Jen Sweet and her environmental engineering company, Haley and Aldrich, for 14 years. When there is a utility repair, an underground pipe explodes, and they're going to have to disturb dirt below 6 inches, they have to, or Jen Sweet has to call or email us and say, hey, we have to do this. Here's what we're going to do to protect the neighbors. Jen has kept her word. She has been honest and transparent, and those 14 years of relationship and of building trust have been absolutely crucial. We started at a kind of a rock bottom point of trust. And Jen, we have tried to be transparent and honest and deliver on what we say we will do. And Jen has done, in our opinion, the same. So IQHQ retaining Jen and Haley and Aldrich is enormous.
Bravo. So we want to increase the access of the community, of the neighborhood, to this site. And what do you see are some of the things that are going to come up on Monday night, or where do you think the kind of loci of interest are? Or
I think one thing, so we talk about safety and beauty and environmental justice as three of our tent poles.
yes.
So beauty without safety isn't going to fly, right? Safety without beauty, you could do it, but it certainly would be nice to have beauty. And after 100 years, why not? Environmental justice, this has been a hazardous waste site for all these decades. And it's gentrified now, but back in the day, and not even that long ago, maybe the 60s and as late as the 60s and 70s, this was a neighborhood where, more hard scrabble neighborhood where people worked really, really hard to get what they had. And now that it's gentrified in a way, we have gentrifying. We have a chance, which is, I have mixed feelings about that, but we have a chance to make a difference.
Well, I know you're working hard to include the Ringe Towers. That's hard to gentrify.
Yes, we have. We just got an Amharic, a man from Ethiopia, who will be interpreting for us at this meeting in a neighborhood group of Amharic speakers, the information, so we can both hear really well from people who've emigrated from Ethiopia and Eritrea, as well as any questions people might have. We can answer them in a place that we think would feel pretty good, because the English speaker nominally running the meeting is the only one who doesn't know Amharic. So everyone else will be, fluent in their language, and we'll be stumbling along trying to find our footing. But the idea is to make a comfortable space, and we are working on getting interpreters in 6 other languages. Cambridge is, surprisingly to some, extremely diverse.
And what are those other languages that are in the neighborhood?
Haitian Creole, Spanish, Brazilian Portuguese, Mandarin, Hindi, Bangla. Probably leaving out one, but those are the ones I can think of at the moment.
That's impressive.
Yeah, we managed to get the flyer translated into 7 languages, but interpreting in a meeting is a little harder. So if anyone is out there, we are paying $25 to interpreters to come to this meeting and interpret in those languages. We have an Amharic person, but we need all the rest.
Yeah, there must be ways to, such a strong Haitian community. I like taking taxis in Cambridge and Boston and Somerville. They're all Haitian drivers, and so I get to hear about Haiti when I'm in big families and stuff. So it's always
fun. It's a rich neighborhood.
Yeah. Right. The Ocean River Institute is helping with bringing people together and interviewing people and running stories. And so you can see that on our webpage at www.oceanriver.org. And we've hired as our spring intern Anusha Alam, who she used to live in the towers. Now she lives on Ringe Avenue. And she's a student at ULowell. And so we've been having a great time interviewing people, having listening sessions, and getting a sense of some of the issues. And they would love to be able to see friends and stuff at Jerry's Pond. But, safety is the issue, and it comes down to lights, and it comes down to, basically that's what it comes down to, is that
safe crossing of Ringe Avenue.
Yeah. And then that's the big issue is, it's kind of scary getting a baby stroller across that Ringe Avenue and stuff.
Yes. And we also want to make sure the sediment of the pond of Jerry's and the water are safe. And IQHQ the new property owner, and Jen Sweet of Haley and Aldrich, the environmental scientist, are currently working on a plan, as we understand it, to test the sediment and the surface water. And that will tell us a lot. We've had very few tests, and the few tests we have had have shown naphthalene, which is the predominant chemical in mothballs, that acrid smell. That's naphthalene. We've also gotten positive tests for asbestos fibers and petroleum, oil and gas. Those are the main things.
Right. Asbestos is a real concern, and there's a sense that, I mean, you know that there's some asbestos in the ground around there, at least to the north of the pond, and so there's a huge interest in keeping the soils undisturbed, and so not, when I first heard about it, it's like, yeah, let's remediate the grounds, let's have at it, and the feelings are that no, you'll disturb the shrubbery and the trees if you do that, so don't do that. But I'm also concerned, as you said, about the pond and the sediment in there. And there, if it's found to be bad, they could put a lining in the pond and it wouldn't disturb the vegetation on the edges and stuff. So there are things that could be done if that's a problem.
Yeah, there are two ways to safely handle asbestos, and one is to cover it so that it can't escape, and the other is to truck it off. But trucking it off endangers everyone who's near that truck, right? And then as it was here, it usually goes to a neighborhood that is poorer, less resourced, and we really don't want to compound an environmental injustice that was done to this neighborhood in another neighborhood. And the site now Jerry's hasn't been tested that much, so let's leave that aside for a moment, but it sits in these 27 acres. These 27 acres have been tested extensively for asbestos, and at least hundreds of thousands of pounds of loose fiber asbestos sit in the soil. And that's fine because they're covered, they can't move. It's when
hundreds of thousands of pounds.
Yes.
We're talking tons, yeah.
Yes, so it was asbestos brake linings were manufactured at W.R. Grace, and before that at the chemical plant before them, Dewey and Elmies. And so there's a lot of asbestos there, and the concern is it's so mixed in with the dirt
yes,
that you can't even see it. And the worry about asbestos is, unlike most other chemicals or contaminants, it endures. It's great, it's terrific because it retards flame, right? But it also does not dissolve, does not degrade, does not move. And should it become airborne and go into your lungs or into a child's lungs, it stays. And over time, that part of your lungs hardens. And so it can't go in and out like a bellows. You can't breathe. So it can cause, it doesn't always cause, and it has a long incubation period of 20 years, usually. But it can cause terrible lung diseases such as asbestosis and mesothelioma. And W.R. Grace, in their asbestos mines, vermiculite mines in Libby, Montana, had over 1,200 miners and their wives and children become ill with these lung diseases caused by mining with asbestos. And some of that asbestos may have been used at the Cambridge plant. There's some debate about that. So it's a very, very serious contaminant, and it's fine so long as we treat it safely. So we need to know if it's there, get the testing, and then we need to treat it safely. And in 1999, the ALF study group, with a huge support of the neighborhood, the whole neighborhood came together. We filled City Hall, we filled the balcony, we filled the phone lines, and we got the Asbestos Protection Ordinance passed, which says that if you dig below 6 inches in this heavily contaminated site, you need to take very strict protective measures, much like you would take for your furnace. If you had a snow cone on it, you have to, tent it and put a HEPA filter in to suck out the asbestos fibers. Same thing would be true here on this site.
And they did some of that when they were putting Russell Field in. So
They did a lot of testing, and yes, they were very careful with it. And thank God, most of the soil at the top of Russell Field is clean as clean can be.
So if we can handle the asbestos and keep it where it is, then Jerry's Pond can be a very accessible public amenity.
We assume that, so one other piece of information to know from the industrial history of this 100 years of chemical plants on the site is that the area right by Jerry's and what neighbors call the Bird's Head had a bunch of, they're called various things, waste lagoons, settling ponds, sludge ponds. They, as we understand it, they would mix chemicals there or cool down machines or chemicals in these ponds or deposit waste sludge from their products, some of which contained asbestos and other things like naphthalene, other chemicals in these ponds, which were right next to Jerry's. Now, water doesn't just stay in one place. Chemicals don't just stay in one place. They move with the groundwater. They move, with the exception of asbestos, which just stays right the heck where it is unless you dig it up. They move. So we want to be sure that Jerry's is, I'm sure it's an urban clay pit. It's going to be dirty to a certain extent, but we don't want it to be harmful to neighbors.
So does that require testing outside of Jerry's Pond area to check these other places, or can we do more tests in Jerry's Pond, test for different chemicals or something?
Well, I am not the scientist expert, but having been with this for 25 years, I can say, yes, we need to test the edges of the pond. We need to, a lot of the soil of the rest of the site has been tested south of Jerry's, and which is over by Fresh Pond Apartments and 402 Ringe, and also over by Alewife Brook Parkway on the east of Jerry's or west of Jerry's, is under-tested or untested. Those areas either need to be tested or we need to assume they're heavily contaminated and treat them accordingly.
Wow. So again, what's the invitation for Sunday night?
So Sunday night, whereas on January 14th, we tried to present a lot of information kind of fast and then listen to neighbors in a community voice section. This time we will do very little in the way of presentation other than here's how Zoom works and here are the breakout groups. This time we will be primarily in small breakout groups so that it's a little easier to speak up. It can be intimidating to speak in a whole group. And we will have one or two people from the Alewife study group leading and taking notes and whatnot. And we will ask neighbors, what are your hopes? What are your concerns? What are your ideas about traffic, about contaminants, about habitat, which would of course include Jerry's, beauty. What would you like to see here? How do we make this place safe? And then we, at the end of the small group time, we will ask people to report from each group. And then we'll collect those reports so that we can begin to find that Venn diagram of overlap.
Right.
And start to forge actions that get neighbors where we want to go.
So can anyone in Cambridge attend?
Absolutely. It's free.
How do they reach you?
We have a website where you can get the link and register. It's www.alewife, A-L-E, and then wife, WIFE.org. You can call me. I'm LisaBirk, 617-861-7448. And we will hook you up with this meeting. We definitely have an interpreter in Amharic if you are from Ethiopia and Eritrea and you want Amharic speakers to be transmitting the info, we will have that. We are working on getting interpreters in, as I said, the 5 or 6 other languages. It's a big ask, but we're working on it, and we are committed to that going forward.
Lisa, we're out of time. I've got to thank you
Oh,
for
thank you so
talking
much.
about Jerry's Pond, and thank you.
Thank you so much. We hope to see people this Sunday, 4:30 to 6.
And thanks a lot for listening. Until next time, please take care of yourself and try to take some care of this planet of ours.